Hi, this is Johnny. I'm coming with another Bible study today, and we're beginning Protecting Your House from Pests. We finished Building Your House, which was the first book I ever wrote, and this is the first edition that Pathway Press published. It's out of print now, and so I'm doing the second edition, and it will look more like this. It will have the blue with the rock, and it looks like a blueprint. In protecting your house from pests, we want to make sure that our houses are kept from evil spirits and from bad attitudes and from things that would try to invade our spiritual homes now that we have them all built. And the first thing that we want to talk about is the women that's in this battle for the home. The battle that our enemy would like to invade. He would like to put all of his little pests in there like we try to keep out of our homes, and he would like to take over our homes. But we're going to fight him, and we're not going to allow him to do that. In this book, we'll be talking about where the pests enter, how they work to destroy, and what we do to rid ourselves of them. We're going to discuss what the Bible teaches, and we'll find out that there is special armor with which to protect ourselves and our family. We'll know that there is revealing light to expose the varmints in their hiding places. There is spiritual pesticide that will help us to exterminate the destroying bugs, and we want to learn all that we can to keep these spiritual pests out of our homes and to keep our house pest-free. So let's get started. Now, this war on our home started with a woman. Ephesians 6:10 says, "Finally, my brethren," or sisters, "be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might." So we want to talk about strong women and how to be a strong woman. The first woman we're going to talk about evidently was not a strong woman. It was Eve in the Garden of Eden, and that's where it all began. Everything was wonderful in the garden. There was nothing, there were no destroying pests or nothing evil in the garden. There were no ants or roaches or rats or anything to pollute or scare us. There were no flies buzzing around your ears while you tried to sleep, or mosquitoes making angry, itchy whelps on your skin. There was none of that. Life was perfect. But then, God didn't create us to be robots and to just take commands and do as we're commanded. He created us to be free moral agents and to have and make choices. The outcome depends on our choices. Adam and Eve were fine in the garden until God said, "Do not eat of this particular tree." Now, they had lots of trees that they could eat from. They had all kinds of delicious fruit. But when God said, "Do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil," then they got curious. Eve was the one that got curious. And I think she probably took a little stroll and said, "Let me see what all's in this garden." And when she came to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, there was a serpent there. And of course that serpent represents our enemy. He's still our enemy today. And he said to her, "Didn't God say you can't eat of the trees of the garden?" And she said, "Oh no, we can eat of all the trees of the garden except this one. But if we eat this one, we will die." And so the enemy did what he does to all of us. He lied. He said, "Oh no, you won't die. It won't hurt you to eat of this fruit. God knows that when you eat it, you'll be like him. You'll know things. You will know good from evil." Now, up until this time, there was no evil in the garden. Nothing bad. Not anything was bad in the garden until Eve decided that she would disobey God and she would eat that fruit. And then, of course, you probably know the story that she ran to her husband and said, Adam, this fruit is so delicious. Come, you've got to taste it. And he, being a man, listened to his wife and was persuaded by her whines or her pleas, whatever it was. Maybe she batted her eyes, I don't know, or smiled or winked or whatever she did. But he did what she suggested. And since then, we've been in a warfare. We've been fighting the enemy of our souls. And this little book will help us to learn how to go into this warfare that we are in, and how to keep our house, our spiritual house, free from the pests that Satan would like to put in there. It reminds me of the story when I was about 4 years old. My father had been a pastor for two different churches, and I think he was at each one for a year. And then he decided he needed more training to be a minister and a pastor, and so he quit what he was doing and went to Sevierville, Tennessee. Of course, we all went with him, and he went to the Bible training school for the Church of God there. That was before it was moved later to Cleveland, Tennessee, and it became Lee University. At first it was Lee College. That's when I went, when it was named Lee College. I went to the Lee Academy. I was still in high school when I went, and that my mama caught me kissing a boy in the living room of our house and sent me away to Lee. I think she thought I would be safer there. But for whatever the reason, I loved being there, and I learned some things. But when I was just about 4 years old, and my dad was in Sevierville at the Bible Training School, they called it BTS back then. Of course, the students like to laugh and say the BTS stood for beans, taters, and soup, because they served a lot of that in the cafeteria. But one day, several of the ministers and their wives and some of the children went out to the woods to cut down trees. Now, I don't know what the trees were for, but I knew that the men had a job to do, and there was a purpose in this, and so quite a few of them went. And I had to go with my dad because my two sisters were in school and my mother was working that day. So we got to this huge clearing. It was a big open clearing with trees all the way around the clearing. And there was 3 logs that had already been cut down, and they were laying like here and across here and across here. And there was a big crosscut saw laying across the open end over here. 6 feet long crosscut saw. Very wicked looking thing. And my father looked at me and he said, "Johnny Lee?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You see all this land out here?" And I said, "Yes, sir." "All this open space?" "Yes, sir." He said, "You can play any place you want, all out here in this open field, play any place except right here where this saw is laying. Do not play right here." And I said, "Yes, sir." And then he went over where the coffee was coming. He could smell that good smelling coffee that somebody was brewing on an open fire, and he went to get himself a cup of coffee. So I stood there and looked at the saw and remembered that he said, "Do not play there." But other children came up, and I saw them get on the log, walk down it, right past the saw, walk across, and then walk back up this way, across the saw, and then jump off at the end. And I thought, Daddy said do not. But they're doing it, and nothing happened to them, and I'm going to do it too. So I went down to the end of the log, and I got on, and I began to walk, and I took about 3 or 4 steps, and I got to the saw, and to this day I don't know what happened. But the next thing I knew, I had fallen on the saw. I was straddled the saw. And I was so startled. It was almost like somebody pushed me onto the saw. I was so startled, but I didn't feel any pain. And I thought, oh, I better get up from here before Daddy sees that I'm playing where he told me do not play. So I looked down, and when I looked down, I saw that my leg was split open, about a foot, about this long, right down the calf of the back of my leg. Blood was dripping out and running into the dirt, and it's all of a sudden the pain hit my brain, and I began to scream, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." Only I was screaming in a much higher pitched voice than that. My daddy came limping over. He had a short leg, one that was shorter than the other from an accident, but he came running over as fast as he could, and he grabbed me up. People got towels, and they wrapped my leg in a towel, and the blood was soaking through the towel almost as soon as it was wrapped. And he said, "Is there a hospital around here?" And they said, "No, we don't. It's a long ways to the hospital." But he said, someone said there's a nurse that lives right down the road here, and gave the directions, said, "Go to her house and she'll be able to help you." And so we got into the car. My daddy put me in the seat and got in the car. And I had never seen him look so stern. And he said, when he cranked up the car, he looked at me and he said, "Johnny Lee?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Did I tell you not to play around that saw?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "You disobeyed me, didn't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And I said, "Are you going to whip me, Daddy?" Now, I don't know why I said that. I had never been spanked, but my sister had, and I had seen my sister get a spanking. And I said, "Are you going to spank me, Daddy?" And he thought for a minute, and he said, "No, I'm not. I think you've already learned your lesson." And I was so relieved. I just let out my breath of relief. And then I thought, "Oh, but Mama will spank me." Well, we went down the road to find the nurse, and it took a long time. It seemed like a long time. And I said, "Daddy, will my leg fall off now?" And he said, "I don't think so." He said, "I think the nurse will be able to help you." But I had never seen him look so worried. And so we got to the nurse's house, and she told us to come in, and she laid me down on a table, and she talked about that it needed stitches, that I need to go to the hospital. And I began to cry, "No, Daddy, don't take me to the hospital. No, don't put stitches," because I had seen Mama sew clothes, and I thought, "No, don't put stitches. Don't put a needle in it. It's already hurt." So when we left, she bandaged it up really good and tight, and she said, "I think this will hold it, and she'll be okay until you can get something done, and it may heal like this." I was really relieved, and we didn't go to the hospital. We went home, and it took a while for that long place to heal up. I mean, it went through all kinds of icky-looking stages, but finally it healed. And it left a scar on the back of my leg about this long, and about part of it's about this wide. And when I became a teenager, people would say to me really often, because we girls wore hose back then, or stockings, and people would say to me often, "Johnny, you've got a run in the back of your stocking." And I knew it was only my scar showing. And I'd say, "No, that's just a scar where I cut my leg the day I learned to mind my daddy." So I had to go through a painful experience to learn obedience to my literal father, earthly father. And sometimes we as Christians, as born-again believers, we go through some hard things to learn that we should obey our Heavenly Father. He's laid out certain rules that is for our benefit, and our life will be so much better if we follow His rules, because He loves us with an everlasting love. That means it never ends, and it's an unconditional love. He loves us entirely and totally. Well, Adam and Eve did not obey God, and because of that, we've had some bad consequences, and we have suffered. Mankind has suffered because sin entered in the world, and sin brings death. The Bible tells us that sin brings death. So if you think when you do wrong that you're getting by with it and there are no consequences, I'm sorry to tell you there will be consequences. But there's good news, because you can come to God and you can tell Him, I'm sorry for my sins. I'm sorry I did wrong. I'm sorry I disobeyed. Just as I told my daddy, Daddy, I'm sorry that I disobeyed you and I suffered consequences. But my daddy forgave me and he didn't spank me. And God will forgive you and He won't spank you. Now, Eve was the first woman that began this battle that we're in to protect our house from pests. And our enemy is Satan. We'll talk about our enemy later. But right now we're just going to talk about the women that's in this battle. Next week we'll talk about two women named Naomi and Ruth. And you'll see that one was the mother-in-law, one was the daughter-in-law. And we'll talk about the struggles that they faced and the things that they went through and how they came out. God bless you. I hope you've gained something from this lesson today. And I'll see you next Tuesday on Turnaround Tuesday. Bye.